good to have you join me on Global News in Zuma, Nigeria. The stories making rounds at this hour says India expels Canadian diplomat. Protests in Guatemala over poll results. Debris of U.S. F-35 fighter jet found. Moscow launches air raids on Lviv and 3 elite Russian brigades routed in Donetsk. Stay with me for these and more stories. The Indian Foreign Ministry said a senior Canadian diplomat has been ordered to leave India hours after Ottawa expelled an Indian diplomat in an intensifying rift over the killing of 6 separatists earlier this year. New Delhi's decision reflected its growing concern at the interference of Canadian diplomats in our internal matters and their involvement in anti-India activities, the Foreign Ministry said in a statement on Tuesday. The dwelling ejections comes as ties between Canada and India are tense. Trade talks have been derailed and Canada just cancelled a trade mission to India that was planned later this year. Protests by pro-Singh independence groups in Canada have exasperated Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government. On Monday, Canada said it was actively pursuing credible allegations connecting Indian government agents to the murder of the Singh separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar outside a cultural center in Surrey, British Columbia on June 18th. Nijjar was reportedly organizing an illegal referendum in India for an independent Sikh nation at the time of his death. India rejected the Canadian accusation as absurd and motivated and urged it instead to take legal action against anti-Indian elements operating from its soil. The Indian authorities last year announced a cash reward for information leading to Nijjar's arrest, accusing him of involvement in an alleged attack on a Hindu priest in India. The Sikh independence or Khalistan movement is barred in India, where officials see it and affiliated groups as a national security threat. But the movement still has some support in northern India, as well as countries like Canada and the United Kingdom, which are home to a sizable Sikh diaspora. On Monday, Justin Trudeau, Canadian Prime Minister, told Parliament he brought up Nijjar's killing with Modi at the Group of 20 G20 summit last week. He said he told Modi that any Indian government involvement will be unacceptable and that he asked for cooperation in the investigation. India's Foreign Ministry released a statement on Tuesday dismissing the allegation and saying Trudeau had made similar allegations to Modi. Such as unsubstantiated allegations seek to shift the focus from Khalistani terrorists and extremists who have been provided shelter in Canada and continue to threaten India's sovereignty and territorial integrity, the statement said, referring to the proposed name of a Sikh homeland. Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly said a top diplomat who she said was the head of the Indian intelligence in Canada was expelled as a consequence. If proven true, this will be a great violation of our sovereignty and of the most basic rule of how countries deal with each other, Joly said. As a consequence, we have expelled a top Indian diplomat. On elections, numerous of protesters have flooded the streets of Guatemala, answering the call issued by President-elect Bernardo Arevalo to defend the integrity of the country's recent elections. Arevalo took to social media to rally his supporters last Friday, asking them to join him in Guatemala City on Monday as he filed a legal challenge against those he considers coup-mongers. The time has come for all of us together as one nation to step forward, raise our voices and put a stop to that corrupt and coup-mongering minority that tries to deny the people of Guatemala the right to live in democracy, Arevalo wrote. He also promised to take his complaint to Guatemala's Supreme Court of Justice. Ever since he emerged as one of 2 finalists in the June 25th presidential election, Arevalo, a dark horse candidate who campaigned on fighting corruption, has seen his presidential ambitions beset by challenges from the political formation. He has continued to be an aim even after winning the August 20th runoff in a landslide. Critics fear that actions taken on the figures like Guatemala's Attorney General Maria Consuelo Porras are a ploy to derail his election victory and scamper the will of the voters. The United States has earlier sanctioned Porras for involvement in the significant corruption. After Arevalo became a front-runner on June 25th, Porras' office opened a probe into his political party, the Sikh movement, claiming signatures collected years ago to form the party were fraudulent. Her office also sent police officers to raid the seat movement's headquarters, as well as the offices of Guatemala's Supreme Electoral Tribunal. Officials with the tribunal have criticized the invasion as unlawful. Police officers reportedly opened boxes containing ballots from the race, a step critics say violates voters' privacy and compromises the integrity of the polls. Now, the United States military said it has finally found debris from a missing F-35 fighter jet a day after seeking help from the public in locating wreckage from the elusive warplane after a pilot ejected from the aircraft for unknown reasons. According to the Marine Corps Joint Base Charleston, the debris fueled from the F-35B Lightning II jet that went missing on Sunday afternoon was located on Monday in South Carolina's rural Williamsburg County. Personnel from Joint Base Charleston and at MCAS Beaufort SC, in close coordination with local authorities, have located a debris field in Williamsburg County. The debris was discovered 2 hours northeast of the JB Charleston. The base said on social media, while also thanking local, county and state officials for their help in the hunt for the missing stealth fighter plane. The debris was located about 2 hours northeast of the Marine base, and local residents were being asked to stay clear of the site. Authorities had been searching for the jet since the pilot, whose name has not been released, parachuted to safety into the North Charleston neighborhood at about 2 p.m. on Sunday, and the aircraft continued flying in what some called a zombie state. The Marines said the pilot was taken to a hospital where he was in stable condition. Military officials later appealed in online posts for any help from the public in locating the aircraft, which cost approximately $80 million. The request urged an avalanche of jokes and memes on social media from people disbelieving that the U.S. military could lose such an advanced warplane. On Monday, all Marine Corps aviation units were also ordered to pause operations for 2 days. General Eric Smith, the acting commandant of the Marine Corps, ordered the stand-down, during which commanders will reinforce safe flying policies, practices and procedures with their Marines. According to a Marine Corps announcement, the loss of the F-35 was the third event documented as a Class A mishap over the past 6 weeks. Such incidents involve damages that reach a cost of $2.5 million or more when a Department of Defense aircraft is destroyed or someone dies or is permanently disabled. No details were provided on the 2 prior occasions, but in August, 3 U.S. Marines were killed in the crash of a V-22B Osprey tiltrotor aircraft during a training exercise in Australia, and a Marine Corps pilot was killed when his combat jet crashed near a San Diego base during a training flight. Precisely what happened that caused the loss of the F-35 is under probe. A pilot in a second F-35 returned safely to Joint Base Charleston. The planes and pilots were with the Marine Fighter Attack Training Squadron 501 and the 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing base in Beaufort near the South Carolina coast. According to manufacturer Lockheed Martin, a major advantage of the F-35 is its near impossibility to be tracked by radar and its advanced sensor and other equipment. On Russia-Ukraine war, local officials said the western Ukrainian city of Lviv was hit by early morning blasts as air defenses engaged in stopping waves of Russian air attacks. The city mayor, Andriy Sadovy, said early on Tuesday that air defenses are operating in the region and warned residents to seek cover. Ukraine's Air Force said the threat of Shahid Iranian-made drones remains in the Lviv region. Air defenses are operating. Western Ukraine came under an air attack alert beginning at about 12 o'clock. Several waves of drones attempted to hit targets in Lviv city, starting at about 1:30 GMT, with numerous explosions heard as air defenses intercepted the incoming unmanned aerial vehicles, according to reports. Sadovy later reported that a fire at an industrial warehouse had broken out and emergency services were tackling the blaze. Initial reports were of 1 person injured. He said the scale of the attack and full extent of the destruction were not immediately known. There was no instant comment from Russia. The head of the Lviv region's military administration, Maxim Kazutovsky, said 2 people, a man and a woman, were rescued from beneath rubble in the city. Though far from the front lines of fighting in the east and south of Ukraine, Lviv has come under deadly Russian missile and drone attacks that have targeted civilian infrastructure and residential buildings, leading to considerable damage and loss of life among city residents. Still on Russia-Ukraine war, the general in command of Ukrainian ground forces said his troops have routed 3 of the best Russian brigades fighting on the front lines in the eastern Donetsk region of Ukraine. On Monday, General Alexander Syrskyi also said that a recapture of the 2 eastern Ukrainian villages in recent days, Klishchivka and Andrivka, both of which are located on higher ground near the destroyed town of Bakhmut, was an important breakthrough. In the fighting in the Bakhmut section, some of the enemy's best units have been crushed and have completely lost their combat power, Syrskyi said in a statement. The Russian units in question were the 72nd Motor Rifle Brigade as well as the 31st and 83rd Air Assault Brigades. Commending the recapture of Klishchivka and Adrivka, Syrskyi said Ukrainian forces were continuing their advance and had some success penetrating Russian defense lines, though Moscow's forces were counter-attacking from several directions in an effort to regain their lost positions. These settlements, at first glance small, were important elements in the enemy's defensive line, which stretched from Bakhmut to Horlivka. Syrskyi said, referring to a town about 40 kilometers, 25 miles from Bakhmut, as a result of our troops' successful actions, the enemy's defensive line, which it tried to close by throwing over available reserves into battle, was breached, he said. Ilya Yevlash, Ukrainian military spokesperson, also underlined the tactical importance of Klishchivka, saying in televised comments that its recapture exposed the southern flank of Bakhmut and was a favorable springboard for further progress. Russian forces captured the town of Bakhmut in May, but Ukrainian forces continued to fight in fierce urban warfare that became one of the bloodiest and longest battles since Russia invaded last year. Moscow denied on Saturday it had lost control of Adivka, and the newest Ukrainian claims of battlefield gains against Russian forces could not be independently verified. Away from Russia-Ukraine war, now anxiety as Australia declares El Nino. Australia has declared an El Nino weather phenomenon is underway as a rare September heat wave set temperatures rising in the country's southeast and led to the first total fire ban in 3 years. Bureau of Meteorology (BOM) forecaster Carl Bergaza said, according to report, that we are already seeing extreme conditions in some parts of the continent, particularly in the duration of heat. The state of New South Wales NSW has recorded temperatures as much as 16 degrees Celsius, 60 degrees Fahrenheit above the September average in recent days. On Tuesday, temperatures in Sydney, Australia's most populous city, reached 34.4 degrees Celsius, that's 93.9 degrees Fahrenheit, just short of all-time September record of 34.6 degrees Celsius, 94.3 degrees Fahrenheit, set in 1965. Some 61 bushfires had been reported across NSW as of Tuesday morning, with 13 still to be contained, authorities said. The NSW Rural Fire Service said in a statement that due to stronger than forecast winds along the far south coast, catastrophic fire danger is expected this afternoon in the region. These are the most dangerous conditions for a fire. Forecasters say temperatures are anticipated to remain high on Wednesday, with the strong winds creating some of the riskiest bushfire conditions since the end of 2019, when fires swept through southeastern Australia, killing hundreds of millions of native animals and destroying vast tracts of forest and thousands of rural homes. We're in for a tough couple of days and we need the community to be very vigilant, NSW Rural Fire Service Commissioner Rob Rogers said, according to a report. 21 schools in NSW, mostly along the state's southern coast, have been closed because of the danger of fire. Sydney Harbour was last week shrouded in smoke as firefighters on the city's fringes lead controlled blazes in an attempt to limit the risk of bushfires ahead of what is expected to be a hot and dry summer in the southern hemisphere. An El Nino generally causes dry conditions in Australia and is associated with extreme weather events such as cyclones and droughts. The World Meteorological Organization earlier this year forecast that there was a 90% chance of El Nino conditions forming over the second half of 2023. Australia's September heatwave is expected to break with the arrival of the cold front, with temperatures dropping back to their low 20s on Thursday. The summer will be hotter than average and certainly hotter than the last 3 years, the BOM's Brangaza said. Since the so-called Black Summer bushfires ended in March 2020, Australia has had a series of wetter, cooler summers. In African scenes, victims of August 30th crackdown buried in Democratic Republic of Congo. The families of those killed during a crackdown on an anti-army demonstration on 30th August gather at a cemetery in Goma for their loved ones' burial. Dozens of bodies are laid to rest as the families call for justice to be done after around 50 civilians were killed at the protest by members of the Congolese armed forces. The government's official death toll so far stands at 57, with 6 soldiers, including 2 officers, being held responsible. We call on the government to make sure that the criminals who committed these acts are punished as severely as possible, says Malachi Mabutwa, a relative attending the burial. The killing attributed to soldiers, the families of the victims were able to bury their dead on Monday. This is a crime against humanity. It has established, according to all the testimony received by the military court, that it was the Republican Guard that perpetrated this crime. And Article 165 of our Constitution states that when the President of the Republic or the Prime Minister are perpetrators, co-perpetrators, or accomplices in serious and flagrant violations of human rights, they are liable to the offense of high treason, expressed by Jean-Baptiste Kweskwewa, National MP for Goma and member of the opposition. Congolese Deputy Prime Minister of Interior Kazadi traveled to Goma on Monday from the capital Kinshasa, some 2,000 kilometers away, to meet the families of the victims and speed up the burial process because of the health risks, according to the minister. I'm appealing for peace and calm. The government of the Republic has decided to follow this case very closely. Justice will be done, and if the damage has to be repaired, the government will do so. More stories coming your way just in a moment from Nigeria. Do stay with us. You're welcome back. On stories from Nigeria, strikes, FG NLC talk ends in deadlock. In a bid to beat the deadline for the scheduled beginning of an indefinite strike that may lead to the shutdown of the economy, the federal government on Monday held a meeting with organized labor on post-subsidy removal palliatives for workers. However, the meeting, hosted by the Minister of Labour, Simon Lalong, in Abuja, failed to reach a consensus as the Nigerian Labour Congress (NLC) insisted that the federal government must meet its demand ahead of the 21-day ultimatum issued on September 1st by the Congress. The union had on September 1st handed down the 21-day ultimatum to the federal government over the delay in sharing of palliatives, saying it might be forced to declare an indefinite labor action if its demands were not met. The NLC mobilized workers for a 2-day warning strike on September 5th and 6th in furtherance of its demands, partly grounded in social and economic activities in many states, with banks, ministries, agencies, and departments closed to the public in some states. The NLC leadership had said the action was in preparation for a total shutdown of the economy, which will begin at an expiration of the ultimatum on Friday. The NLC and the Trade Union Congress, among other demands, were asking for wage awards, implementation of palliatives, tax exemptions and allowances to the public sector workers, and a review of the minimum wage. Though the federal government made a commitment to restructure the framework for the engagement with organized labor on palliatives, the 8-week time frame set for the end of the process expired in August with no action whatsoever. At the end of the meeting on Monday, both parties vowed to find solutions to the major demands tabled before the government by the organized labor before the deadline, reports say. Lalong said many of the items presented by labor were still under consideration before the final agreement. The minister stated, and I quote, "Our meeting was very robust. It was a fruitful meeting. Many of the items presented by Labour are still under consideration before the final agreement or discussions. It was a fruitful meeting. I thank the NLC for coming to the meeting and for their very useful contributions." Joe Ajaero, the president of NLC, also described the meeting as fruitful, but said only the presidency could take decisions on the demands presented to the government. He said the organized labor was prepared to meet with the government any time of the day to find solutions to its demands and stop the planned strike. According to the NLC president, like the minister said, we had a fruitful deliberation and we have agreed to continue to make sure we arrive at meaningful agreements within the remaining days of the ultimatum. And finally, on the news, Edo political chaos deepens. Despite interventions from different quarters, it seems there is no backing down in feud between Edo State Governor Godwin Obaseki and his deputy, Mr. Philip Shuaibu. As yesterday, things got messier with the deputy governor reportedly locked out of Government House in Benin City. But an unassigned statement, which was also not confirmed, seemed to make a case for the governor. It alleged that Shuaibu tried to force his way into the personal office of the governor along with his security aides, even when his office had been moved to another property. However, Human Rights Writers Association of Nigeria, Huriwa, condemned what it called irritating pettiness by Obaseki and his unnecessary executive antagonism against Shuaibu. Huriwa urged the State House of Assembly to step in and investigate the matter. Yesterday's incident started when Shuaibu got to the office to the gate to his office, and the main entrance leading to the story building was locked with chains and heavy padlocks. The deputy governor and his aide waited for about an hour and left. He was said to have made frantic calls trying to reach the governor, but to no avail. Sources revealed that Shuaibu later had talks with the Commissioner of Police and Director of Department of State Services, DSS, to complain about how he was locked out of his office. The deputy was said to have summoned the Government House Camp Commandant Ibrahim Babatunde SP to ask why he was locked out of his office, but was told it was a directive from above, adding that the Chief Security Officer CSO of Government House, William Swaba, will be in a better position to explain. Moreover, it was gathered that Shuaibu contacted Waba via phone and he promised to come but never did. The report said all entreaties by the security operatives who asked him to kindly go back and call the governor if he wanted to see his principal was snubbed. Instead, he kept pushing the gate, causing a scene. A letter signed by Secretary to the State Government SSG Osaro Dion Ogis dated September 15, 2023, addressed to the office of the Deputy Governor seemed to suggest that Shuaibu had been informed of his relocation to a new office. The letter, which was received by the Deputy Governor's Office on September 18, 2023, stated, "I write to inform you that His Excellency, the Governor, has approved the relocation of your office accommodation to number 7 Dennis Osadebe Avenue, GRA, Benin City." A recap of major stories says India expels Canadian diplomat. Protests in Guatemala over poll results. Debris of US F-35 fighter jet found. Moscow launches air raids on Lviv, and 3 elite Russian brigades routed in Donetsk. That's all on the news. Thanks for watching. I am Lois Strikey. Enjoy the rest of your day.